Well, last October's Alberta referendum on scrapping equalization generated a 62% yes vote. We've not heard a lot on the issue, but now, in the wake of the federal budget, there are renewed calls for action on equalization reform. And helping drive that discussion is Bill Bewick, Executive Director of Fairness Alberta. Bill, in going through the depths of the budget over the past week, what's your takeaway where equalization payments are concerned?
One of the problems the budget faces is a massive deficit. So that's not new. That's been happening for a number of years now. Obviously, with COVID, that was a very special case. But the problem is that spending isn't going back to pre-pandemic levels. And so the whole country is facing a debt problem. Albertans pay more than our per capita share for all government spending, including debt repayment. So we're even more on the hook for that. And so we should all be looking for ways to find reasonable places where we can reduce that debt substantially. Now, on the other hand, Albertans had this referendum last October. We spoke pretty loudly. 650,000 of us said, we want this reform. This isn't fair. And one of the things we've pointed out at fairnessalberta.ca is that the spending on equalization is far greater. It's just such a bloated program, considering what the needs are, considering how close together the provinces have become since 2015, and yet the costs keep going up, the spending keeps going up, and the payments to provinces like Quebec, who don't really need it, keep going up. So we feel like that's a very easy place where the government should be doing some reforms, reducing the spending on that program, and making the whole nation more sustainable long term.
At the end of the day, Bill, where does the budget leave Alberta and the call for reform?
Well, like I said, we have a huge share of that debt. There's a couple things that the provincial government has asked for, one of which was unanimously supported by the other provinces, and that is fiscal stabilization. That's the fund that kind of kicks in for some of the have provinces when they have a serious drop in revenue. It's supposed to make it stabilize our ability to deliver services. Somehow the government got every premier to agree that Alberta should get a retroactive payment from when we dropped $8 billion back in 2015 and only got a couple $100 million of a payment. And that's been ignored. So there's no reforms on fiscal stabilization, ignoring a unanimous call to give Alberta a special payment for that massive drop we faced, and then ignoring the referendum, which is unfortunate because the whole point of this and making it a constitutional question was that if it passes, it triggers a duty to consult by the federal government. And so far, they've just kind of ignored it. And we're trying to, the Saskatchewan government's already on board for reforms. We're now trying to target folks in Ontario and British Columbia and try to get them to understand how much they're paying. It's about $2,400 per family of four from each of those provinces is what it works out to in funding this program. And all those dollars go straight to a couple of provincial governments, Quebec and the Maritimes and Manitoba. So it's pretty outrageous when people in BC and Ontario are also struggling with how to cover things like healthcare, to have that giant check going to just a few select governments. It's really unfair, and it's a time when healthcare and other expenses are pressing all provincial governments. That money should be coming more fairly to all the country.
In terms of a big pot of cash, how legitimate, though, a discussion is this right now, given the state of Alberta's finances, with resource revenue flooding into provincial coffers?
Yeah, our argument's never been about helping Alberta balance its budget. Our argument is that the program is seriously flawed, and it's racking up massive levels of debt, and it's just unfairly transferring wealth from some provinces. Sometimes we can afford it, sometimes we can't. But it's just unfair in principle to be taking that much to hand over to the same 5 provinces all the time. It doesn't encourage them to try and become more economically robust and do the investments and take the chances that they need to get sustainable in the long term, because their choices are being kind of negatively reinforced by these giant checks that keep coming in to keep them afloat. So it's a little bit trickier for Alberta at the moment, but the last time we had a boom, we kind of all ignored all these questions. And then when the boom ended, we were looking around saying, hey, how come no one's ever spoken up on these issues before? We really need them addressed. So it's important to keep the pressure on, keep informing Canadians about why this is important. And, you know, Albertans are now shelling out about $8 million every day to fund this equalization program. It's added up to about $1.3 billion since October 18th. And so it's just unfair that it's being completely ignored like this. And we believe that if more Canadians understood how skewed and flawed the program is, you know, it's not necessarily to scrap it, but to get the spending on it way lower so that more of those dollars are either not being taxed from Albertans and Ontarians and British Columbians, or going to their provincial governments, or going to pay down that debt.
Bill, last question for you. What's it going to take to get the federal government, all the relevant parties to the table and negotiate something?
I believe it is sort of along the lines of what we were arguing, pointing out to people in places like the Greater Toronto area, the Greater Vancouver area, the places that no political party can afford to ignore, get them to realize how much of their dollars they earn and money they send to Ottawa is getting sent straight to the provincial capitals of their neighbors. And I think once people realize that, I mean, there's still lots of Albertans who think Alberta gets equalization payments. So we need to keep raising the awareness on how unfair this program is, because politicians have proven time and again that they don't really want to turn over any apple carts in Quebec or places east of there unless they're forced to. And so it's not enough for just Albertans to be on this. We need British Columbians and Ontarians to realize how flawed it is and how much they are losing out.
All right, we're out of time, Bill. Have to leave it there. Very much appreciate your time this evening, sir. Thank you kindly.
Thank you.
Bill Bewick, Executive Director of Fairness Alberta.